Okay, chapter 5. Perspective is paramount. Hopefully it was worth the wait. Hopefully it is worth the wait. All right, chapter 5. Perspective is paramount. I don't mean to age myself, but I've been around long before what we know today as social media. Don't get me wrong, because back in my day, we had MySpace, Black Planet, AOL, and Yahoo chat rooms, but none of those things were as robust and defining as social media is today. In today's times, social media can literally make or break your day and or your life. One video going viral can change the trajectory of your entire life, whether that's good or bad. And cancel culture is at an all-time high, so folks are continuously checking for skeletons in your closet so that they can dethrone you anyway. What does that have to do with my journey to self? A lot. Social media has come along and defined us. And because we don't have a working definition of self, the definition that social media applies, rooted in worldly things and is ever changing, is simply not a true reflection of who we are. It's all about perception. I've taken some time off social media because I needed to gather my perspective. What I've learned is that social media is an awesome place, but if we're not careful, we'll take on the perspective of the many, neglecting our own individual views on things, life, situations, etc. At times, a lot of us are consumed with the lives of others. That consumption, if we aren't watchful, can lead to us comparing our real lives to their highlight reels. The thing to remember, though, is that perspective is paramount. At some point, I started learning that social media wasn't my diary, and I stopped putting so much online. I came to understand that once something is on the internet, it's on there forever, despite how many times or ways I delete it. In my younger years, I met and dated a man. He didn't know my past habits and could only see who I was at that present time. One day, he told me how fake I was because I was always posting something uplifting and motivational on the internet, but I wasn't living it. And while his words crushed me because it was never my intent to be incongruent, still a demon I had to face. Perspective is paramount. He saw me as a villain in real life who played a hero on the internet. I saw me as a trying person who posted statuses that helped me level up so that others could level up too. But whose account do you think I believed? If you guessed his, you'd be right, because I didn't have confidence and wasn't secure in my love for or definition of self. I allowed who he thought I was to determine who I really was. And every time when I posted a new status, I felt discord. It felt unclean and disingenuous. I was now fighting a battle that was never mine to begin with. Imagine sitting on top of a tall building. Imagine being totally comfortable and just hanging out, chilling. Let's pretend that the sky is very clear and it's a beautiful day or night. Your view is uninterrupted. You can easily and clearly see what surrounds you and everything that surrounds what surrounds you. It's amazing, astonishing, beautiful, breathtaking. It's consistent and full. It's spacious and ever-flowing. Now imagine coming down from the tall building and standing at its base. Imagine being on the main road outside of this building when traffic is non-existent. Imagine that it's just you and your thoughts. Everything is disjointed or interrupted. One building ends and another abruptly starts. You see hard turns and curves. You can see the trash on the street and the dirt on the building. You can no longer see miles and miles ahead of you. Your vision is limited to what is right now before you. Your vantage point matters. The Bible offers that we love others as we love ourselves, Matthew 22:39. And while I'm sure we've discussed this already, allow me to slow down to point out something different. You are the standard. How you love yourself is the standard. I hear folks talk about loving their kids more than themselves or loving their partners more than themselves. Well, that's simply out of alignment. How you love you is the standard. That's an easy concept to grasp when we look at something as concrete as aerial views versus ground level views. However, it's much more difficult to grasp when we're speaking in abstracts such as love, success, worth, value, etc. But they're all the same. You cannot truly see them from another's vantage point until you've addressed it and fulfilled it from your very own. And I realize some will make the argument that they can love other people despite not loving themselves. And while I understand the sentiment, I disagree. You love others as you love yourself. You are the standard. What you give to others when you don't truly love yourself is only what you perceive love to be. And that's part of the problem. We have a world full of people walking around seeking love but not understanding how to obtain it. The realization is that we are both our locks and our keys. When we learn to love self, we set self free to be love, embodying all that is for us. Now, why am I talking about love in a chapter about perspective? Because your vantage point is your perspective. As we saw earlier, if you stand on the ground and look around, it will look widely different than if you stand on the rooftop and look over the same area. Perspective is paramount. How you love your kids when you don't love yourself is widely different than how you love them once you've learned to love yourself. You no longer pour from empty cups. You can only pour from the perspective that you're at. On this journey to self, one thing that I've learned and hold steadfast to is that perspective is paramount. If you spend any amount of time connecting with me, you're probably sick of hearing me say this or paraphrasing it in other words. But truthfully, life is what you see it as. I started following this pastor on Facebook years ago, and at the time, she constantly taught about the thought and feeling cycle. At first, the idea was so strange to me, but eventually, I came to understand. What you perceive as your reality is what comes to fruition. What you perceive as being impossible can never come forward because you don't even believe in it. How you think directly impacts how you feel and act. Don't believe me? Just watch. At the end of last year, I had yet another encounter with God. Things were going well in my life, but God had continuously reminded me that He didn't create me to live in sin. During most of last year, I ignored that unctioning and I convinced myself that God gave us grace and would always forgive us. So me sinning would always be forgiven. I reconciled with it and carried on living in my sin. I knew that God would always forgive me, so why not? Sound like anybody? If it does, keep reading or keep listening. One day, God let me see an image of Him sitting on the edge of my bed. The image that was presented before me was someone so powerful yet so sad. In this image, He sat at the edge of my bed with His head bowed into His hands, grieving my continuous decisions of choosing sin over Him. I'm not sure if He was crying, but He was very clearly grieved, and that hurt me. Not long after, He reminded me of how we go to Him when we're grieving or shocked that so-and-so did us any kind of way. Not long after, He reminded me of how we go to Him when we're grieving or shocked that so-and-so did us any kind of way. You know how it goes. Oh God, I can't believe this man or woman will break my heart. How could he or she? If this sounds familiar, it's because you understand the heartbreak attached. Those tears and emotions, seems like the pain would never end. Well, in this conviction, He advised me that when I'm breaking His heart by sinning, He goes to Himself, filled with a great level of grief because I've once again chosen sin above Him. The conviction was so strong that I now ask God to help me govern myself in such a way that He doesn't have to go to Himself about me unless He's going to share good news and rejoice. I just can't fathom continuing to grieve God in that way. That perspective changed my life. How, you might ask? Well, I always knew I was sinning. These weren't things I didn't know, but I chose them because they provided me with things I thought I needed, like connection, attention, comfort, significance, a cure for loneliness, a diversion from my day, etc., etc. I chose to commit sin without fail and without adhering to the conviction because I genuinely felt like I was really the only person I was hurting. The truth, though, is that every time I chose sin, I hurt God. Seeing my decisions as hurting God and others, honestly, it's too much for me. It's just too much. So thank God that I sit down somewhere. If you haven't watched the What Had Happened Was special by Jamie Foxx, I suggest you watch it. One line that he said that continues to stick with me is, When I forgot about God, he blessed me with a stroke. Now you may ask why this sticks with me, but again, perspective. Perspective is paramount. Hebrews 12:6 reminds us that God disciplines those he loves. In Jamie Foxx's special, he talked about how he asked God while all these other folks were being blessed in their wrongdoing, but he was suffering. And God told him, paraphrasing of course, they belong to someone else, but you belong to me. And that was enough to move me to tears, because how many times does it feel like God is picking on you, or us, or your loved ones? How many times does it feel unfair and like your burden is just too heavy to bear? But perspective is paramount. I used to live a life where I felt like things were so unfair. I was supposed to be married with children and successful by now. I was supposed to have climbed the corporate ladder and be at my highest position by now. I was supposed to be coming home to a loving husband who royally spoiled me at every chance he got. I was supposed to have my doctorate degree by now. I was supposed to have my own thriving business by now. I was supposed to be on top of the world by now. These were goals I wrote down long ago. And when they weren't my reality, I felt like a failure. I felt beat up and cast to the side. I felt forgotten about and shattered. And I folded further into myself. I was heartbroken and distraught that my plans had failed. But God. What if my plans didn't work out because the plans God has for me are bigger? What if my plans didn't succeed because I was off making decisions without God, and those decisions were very literally going to take me out, but he saved me because I belonged to him? What if my plans didn't work out because the devil pulled up on God and asked him if he could test me, and God told him that he trusted the him in me? What if my plans weren't God's plans for my life? What if? Perspective is paramount. See, when I was searching for myself, I found me and I found God. But my perspective had to be broken, shattered. I told y'all in the last chapter that I was so focused on being perfect, and God shifted that when he sent me my daughter. But there were other faulty areas in me that needed to be cleaned up also. I used to think that God gave us all of these rules because he wanted to control us. And I thought the power of free will was a facade, because if we chose poorly, he just sends us to hell anyway. It felt damning that more of us would end up in hell than heaven, just because heaven felt impossible to reach. I was so used to fear-mongering and hell and brimstone religion that I couldn't see or comprehend anything else. But perspective is paramount. Over the last 2 years or so, I've been taking time to read the Bible for myself. And what God has shown me is that it's a book of love. The Bible and the rules are about love, not control. God has shown me that he loves us so much that he wants to protect us from the destruction that we can't even see. There are consequences for every action, and while we aren't always privy to said consequences, he is. And those rules are there to help prevent us from facing some of the harshest consequences that will shatter us. Yes, he'll be there with loving arms to pick us up and wipe us clean again, but it grieves him to see his children grieving to begin with. I have 2 children whom I love with every fiber of my being. And the very thought of them hurting makes me emotional. I pray that harm never befalls their heads. I want them as far from pain as the north is from the south and the east is from the west. I want them to be as unfamiliar with pain as humanly possible. And I tell them all the time that it's my job to raise them in such a way that they're able to make wise decisions as they grow older. It's my job to help them as much as possible. Realistically, I can't keep them from experiencing all types of pain, but I can raise them in such a way that they make better decisions so they minimize how much pain they are exposed to. And God's desires for us are the same, but greater, because he's the author and we're simply his artwork. I've been at the same job for years now, and I'm excellent at what I do because I do it with my heart. I've applied for close to 30 jobs and haven't gotten a single one, and have only gotten maybe 2 or 3 interviews. And my company knows I'm amazing at what I do. And I'm educated, very well educated, and I still haven't been given a chance. Initially, I felt like the world was against me and my job was doing it to spite me. And when I viewed it as me settling and such, I was filled with such negative emotions and shame. I felt as though I was underperforming and doing a grave disservice to myself and my family. However, I've now reconciled that I'm right where God wants me to be. And I can see some of the reasons why I'm here in this same position. And I'm thankful and blessed to be able to serve on a daily basis. I'm humbled by the opportunity. Truthfully, this is the most stable that my children and I have ever been. What tops the cake is I read a Bible devotion this morning that confirmed this for me. It simply said, it's easy for us to get caught up in the daunting or mundane tasks that fill our days and miss the significance God is manufacturing through our labor. Could it be that the section of the wall God has given you is important for your sanctification and his glory today, but that he might also have an eternal plan for the work you're doing? What if your simple job is the setting for miraculous kingdom-sized work for generations to come? Perspective is paramount. And to those that don't believe in God, you may be sitting in your seat asking what any of this has to do with you. Well, let me put it in other terms. I have a friend whose plans changed, like many of ours do. This friend had a lot riding on the plans that he'd made. With the change in plans came discomfort, feeling displaced, lack of security, and a plethora of other emotions. Initially, these negative emotions were running rampant, and he was reacting to the blow that life had dealt. However, he and I talked through some things, and he's calm, and he's at peace, and he's easily able to identify his next steps. I have another friend who had financial obligations pop up. None of us are strangers to that. Rather than seeing these financial obligations as problematic, he simply chose to be grateful for the opportunity to be able to handle his business. And he did just that. He handled his business. I'm a single mother to 2 children. When I viewed this as a problem or an issue, I was filled with regret, grief, sadness, and an overwhelming sense of condemnation. No matter what I did, I wasn't able to shake that feeling. It just felt like I'd failed myself and my children. Fast forward to now, though, and I view my singleness as a season and a blessing. Yes, I had children out of wedlock, and when I have more children, I will be married. But I have not failed. I am not a failure. I am successful. I am blessed. My blessings didn't stop simply because I became a single mother. The world is still my oyster dish. I may have to do things differently than the person who doesn't have children or isn't a single parent, but we're all different, and that's okay. So I told y'all about how we moved 300 miles to Central Arkansas from Northwest Arkansas. What I didn't tell you is that the prep work took about a year. I had to hone in and focus on the goal ahead. I deleted social media and cut conversations real short. When times were hard, I reminded myself why I was going so hard and that the breakthrough I needed was right on the other side. I quit allowing the world to give me definitions, and I instead told God daily that if he wanted us to move, he would make it happen. I didn't need the world to tell me who God was. I needed him to show me. And he did. And that move has led to me 2.5 years later being stable for the first time in my adult life. For the first time in my adult life, I am not in survival mode. My dad and I recently had a conversation, and he told me that now that I'm not worried about us surviving, I can start looking at what I plan for the next 5 years. And that made me smile, because I remember the days of just trying to finish that day, let alone even 5 days into the future. What changed? My perspective, because perspective is paramount. When I first started intentionally healing, I asked God to take away the view of me that I had and to instead allow me to see myself as he does. I asked God constantly to let me see myself through his eyes. And you know what happened? I learned to love myself in a way that makes me blush. I heard a song that says, God looks at you like you're the only one in the universe. And truthfully, I'm living those words. And God has shown me how to look at myself with those same set of eyes. The other morning, as I stood in my living room folding my laundry, I had a conversation with myself. I've got to shake this imposter syndrome because it has had me at the bottom of the barrel for far too long. For so many years, I felt undeserving of anything above the bare minimum. Now, I have opportunities being presented to me seemingly left and right, and I have to pause to fully grasp just how magnanimous these opportunities are. The opportunities are so great that I weep tears of joy because I'm humbled, so very humbled. But I also have a track record of self-sabotaging. because of seeing myself as undeserving. Not anymore. In my conversation with myself this morning, I simply reminded myself of this newfound perspective. God didn't create me to be at the bottom of the barrel. In fact, there are scriptures to demonstrate just how much God has planned for me. Probably one of my favorites is Jeremiah 29:11. God has a plan for me, and ensuring for me to be struggling, destitute, and broken down. Psalms 37:25 clearly says, I've never seen the righteous forsaken, nor his seeds begging for bread. Then God tells us that he's the bread of life in John 6:35. And my mind wants to convince me that God is going to make me the exception and allow me to be begging my whole life. That's diabolical. Perspective is paramount. So the message is this. Your life is what you make it. It is. You have to be intentional about how you see life. Life happens to all of us, but is it happening to you or is it happening for you? Is it happening through you? I know you want to give up. I know it's hard. I know healing ain't no fun. But can I tell you that once you change your mindset, you change your whole life. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to get somewhere in a space by yourself. I want you to get some paper and a pen, and I want you to write down the things that have happened to you. I want you to make a list of all those bad things that have happened to you. And then I want you to flip them. And I want you to learn how to tell your story from the point, you used to tell it from the point of a victim, but now you're going to tell it from the perspective of a victor. Because if we're going to walk in victory, oh, by golly, we're going to learn how to think like victors. So instead of saying, my mama didn't love me, I want you to say something along the lines of, I learned how to love myself despite the woman who gave birth not loving me. You see how I put that focus back on me? And it's on the power. Because I overcame what tried to take me out. So I want you to practice that. I want you to practice taking your perspective from that of a victim to that of a victor. Because I need you to know you've already overcome it. Because God got you, boo. I love you.